And welcome back to the Anime Den. And I'm hiding behind some figures, or between some figures. Take your choice. And of course, this time around we're talking about how figures age. I know what you're thinking, figures don't age, they're made out of plastic, they just stay the same all for all their lives. But they don't, they do age. And so what I've got here is two comparisons. Both these figures were manufactured around the same time. So they're both around 20 years old, so we're getting on a little bit in age and bumping everything. So what actually happens when a figure ages? Well, or how does even a figure age? So figures, PVC figures, which both these are obviously PVC figures, and they're actually made by the same company, made by Sakasa, back in the 90s. So when a figure, what actually happens is during the manufacturing process of a figure, they use an agent called plasticizer, and plasticizer gives the figures that nice sort of flexible feel, that soft feel when you first buy them. And obviously Nadia here, which I bought brand new when Nadia first came out, the jacket used to have a lot more play in it, and so did the skirt. The skirt and the jacket are now very stiff. And that's because the plasticizing agent has, of course, evaporated. And it does over time, it evaporates off. Now, when it actually evaporates, or let's go backwards and come forwards a little bit. So, in the case of Nadia, when I bought Nadia, which I do with all my figures, I got her home, I ripped the box to pieces, I pulled Nadia out, and she went on display in my display cabinet. Now what happens there is, because as the plasticizer evaporates, because obviously it evaporates over time, the agent has actually just evaporated away. Sometimes it'll stay on the figure, it'll be like a sticky, mucky sort of material, but a little bit of warm water or some soapy warm water, and you can clean it off, which we do all the time anyway, because figures tend to attract dust, they tend to attract that mucky dust. So 20 years down the track, we'll just have a look at this Nadia, and this Nadia has been kept out of sunlight in a fairly display cabinet. Well, she's not in a display cabinet, she's generally kept in a box. So what you see is, of course, the seam on the head's still quite nice. Still got a lot of vibrant colour about it. The back of the head's got that nice vibrant colour about it. And all in all, it looks quite good. I mean, that little blemish there on the top was always there, unfortunately. It was obviously a screw up in the paint. But all in all, it's still very vibrant. It's still very sort of luscious colouring about it. So Nadia has held up well for her age. She's done very well. And so, of course, King looks, of course, almost the same he did the day he was born. I mean, again, there's a few things that are a little bit stiffer on him, but, hey, he's getting on to be 20 years old. Now, I bought this Ray Ayanami a little bit more recently. I actually brought it at a little convention a couple of months ago. And Ray was actually kept in a box, and Ray's had the hard life. Now, Ray's a great example of how figures age. So, when I bought Ray had obviously been kept in a box, and she'd been exposed heavily to sunlight. The box was quite heavily faded. The actual white plastic packaging that sat behind her was actually brown from the amount of sunlight she'd had. And obviously she'd never been taken out of the box. The first thing you can see is that Nadia stands quite well on her stand. Ray is actually a little short. Now, the stands are the same and the figures are the same scale, but Ray's a little bit shorter. And that's because when figures aren't looked after properly, they do tend to shrink. Sunlight is terrible for figures. Leaving your figures in direct sunlight is the worst thing you can do. The other thing, which you can't see on the camera, but you can feel, Nadia feels still somewhat soft, and she's not glossy feeling. She's just a very nice soft feel still. Not soft, but she doesn't feel too bad. Ray has this very sort of almost pasty, not glossy, but pasty feel about it. Like, it feels cheap today. And remember, this isn't a cheap figure. Sakasa figures are very expensive. When these first sold, I think I probably paid about $80 for my Nadia figure. And this would have been about the same. But this figure, of course, was kept in a box. So what we can see is, straight up, is that this figure has had a few problems. Now, one of the problems is that when a figure is kept in a box, and the plasticizer agent releases, it's got nowhere to go, so it ends up redepositing back on the figure. And what you can see is, of course, straight up, there's a little bit you see a little mark there. I don't know if we can get in there. It's a little bit of blue. Now, there's no blue that far down the jumpsuit. And being that this figure was never out of the box, it should never have been damaged. There should be no blue down there. But of course, that's from the hair. That's some of the plasticizer agent that's come off the hair. It's transferred the colour, it's deposited back down on the figure. And you can even see on the backpack here, I don't know if we can get it around right, but there's a little bit of transference. And that's I don't know if you'll be able to see it there, but yeah, there's a little bit of transference there. Again, that's something that's come off and arrived back on the figure. And even the hair seam, again, I don't know if you'll be able to see it too well on the figure. The hair seam is actually quite damaged. And again, that's the plasticizer agent, that's the sun having nowhere, the sun's beaten down on it, the plasticizer agent's had nowhere to go, everything's shrinking, everything's sort of going a little bit funny in there. And of course, it looks like there's shadowing, it almost looks like there's glue there. Because it's probably not glue, it's probably a plasticizing agent that's just got trapped. And even Ray's belly, it's very rough. I don't know if you'll be able to see it too well on the camera, but it's very rough looking. And it's not been repainted, it's just very rough looking. And even the hip seams are very profound. It says there's been a bit of shrinkage on the hips. You always will see the seams, but there's quite a lot of sort of shrinkage in that going on. And even to the point where Ray has inherited these terrible, again, I don't know if you've ever seen the camera there, we get a bit of capturing there, the cottage hips. And again, that's not a paint problem, that's actually a little bit of plasticizer agent, because you can see the runs, where it's sort of run down and caught. So that's the plasticizer coming off. And of course, she still looks very good, don't get me wrong, and for what I paid for it, I don't mind. But of course, this is what happens when plasticizer gets trapped in a box. And not so much that the plasticizer just gets trapped in the box, the fact that the figure was essentially left in its box and stuck directly in the sun for probably the better part of 20 years anyway. So it's literally just been abused by an owner that didn't know about figure care. So this is one of those sad tales. But what's the tale really telling us? Well, I've always taken my figures out of the box. I've never really cared much for keeping my figures in the box. And a lot of friends say to me, look, resale value, resale value, resale value. They're worth so much more than in the box. And I'm not buying to resell, I'm buying to collect. And so a lot of my friends keep their figures in the box. And this is what happens, is that you end up with this, of course, these problems arising. Now, I didn't know about these problems until fairly recently. I always just did it for the sake of doing it, but I actually read some recent literature on what happens when figures age, which is, of course, it was actually put up on a Good Smile company blog, where they actually talked about the plasticizer agent and what actually happens. And when I first bought these, I just thought, they're aged. Initially, actually, I thought they might have been bootlegs, because it was just like, man, they look really. Because this figure should look more like that. It was like, maybe they're bootlegs of that. But then after I read it, and I sort of obviously did a little bit of homework after, it was like, well, actually, it's quite likely that's exactly what's happened. 20 years in the box with the beating sun on it, it's sort of made the statue a lot less nice looking. Which, of course, actually probably brings down the resale value. And in fact, I only paid $15 for this figure 20 years down the track. So the price has fallen quite sharply. And it's not fallen because it wasn't a good, it's not an Evangelion figure. Evangelion figure is still quite a lot of money. It was more because when I saw it, you could see it had been pounded by the sunlight. You could see that it had been abused by the weather. So, because when we talk about figure care, it's very simple. First things first, don't leave the figure in a box. Get it out. You brought it to see it. See it. Keep them clean. Get it every month or so. Go along and dust them and give them a tidy up, If you want to display them in a display cabinet, which is what I do, do it. They still, because the cabinets are huge, they give you a lot of air and movement in it. So any sort of evaporation that happens is going to just go out into the actual cabinet itself. And 9 times out of 10, it'll just disappear. You'll never see it. But of course, if you leave it in the box, it gets sticky in the box. It's got nowhere to go. It hasn't got a point to escape, because when they build them in the boxes, obviously, and we've all bought figures, they come in that nice hard, so that clammed plastic sort of surround, or they've got a plastic back with a sleeve, with a plastic sort of cover over them. So that's what happens, is that the plasticizer, when it releases, can't go anywhere, so it reattaches back to the figure. So simple figure care out of the box. Give them a clean from time to time. I'm just looking at my Nadia now. I'm just going to have to go get some cloth and water and just give her a bit of a tidy up in a minute. Enjoy your figures. It's as simple as that. Just like you, they want to be free. Get them out of the boxes. And thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.